Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. He put down his cup and looked at the bridge display of the UES horizon. What he saw made his blood run cold. 12 massive ships hung in space above Earth. Each ship was bigger than any human vessel ever built. "Sir, we're getting a signal from the lead ship," said Lieutenant Amy Johnson from her station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. The display filled with the image of something that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. It had 4 arms and eyes that glowed purple. When it spoke, its voice was harsh and cold. "Primitive humans of the 3rd planet. I am High Commander Vexkala of the Zephyrian Empire. Your species has been selected for service in our mining operations. You will surrender immediately. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your world." Jake looked around. The bridge. His crew was staring at him, waiting for orders. Behind him, Communications Officer Betty White was recording everything. Engineer Tom Davis had his hand on the weapon controls, even though their small exploration ship could barely scratch the paint on those alien vessels. "Open a channel," Jake said quietly. Amy nodded. "Channel open, sir." Jake stood up and faced the alien commander. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Horizon. I have a message for you and your empire." The alien tilted its head, clearly expecting immediate surrender. "You picked the wrong species to threaten," Jake said calmly. The alien commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your primitive weapons cannot harm our ships. Your technology is centuries behind ours. You have no choice but to submit." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But we're not going to make it easy for you." The transmission ended. Jake turned to his crew. "Get me Earth Command. Tell them we need every ship, every fighter, every weapon we can get into space. And tell them one more thing." "What's that, sir?" Amy asked. "Tell them the aliens think we're going to roll over and die. Let's show them how wrong they are." 3 hours later, the first battle began. The Zephyrian ships moved forward in perfect formation. Their shields sparkled with energy and their weapons charged with deadly light. They had done this 47 times before against other species. It was always the same. The primitives would fire a few desperate shots, realize they were outmatched, and surrender. But the humans didn't surrender. Admiral Ben Parker commanded the defense of Earth from the space station Luna Base. He had every available ship spread across the solar system. Most were cargo haulers and mining vessels with guns welded to their hulls. A few were proper warships, but nothing that could match the alien technology. "They're coming in formation Delta 7, reported his tactical officer, Commander Lisa Davis. "Textbook approach, just like we studied in the academy." Ben smiled grimly. "That's their first mistake. They're fighting by the book. Send signal Alpha to all ships." The human fleet scattered. Instead of meeting the aliens head-on, they broke apart like a school of fish. Some ships fled toward the asteroid belt. Others dove toward the sun. A few brave souls charged straight at the alien formation. High Commander Vexkala watched the display with confusion. "What are they doing? This is not standard defensive formation." His tactical officer, a 6-armed creature called Zixtar, studied the readings. "Unknown, Commander. Their movements appear random. Random movements are inefficient. Destroy them." The Zephyrian ships opened fire. Their energy beams were incredibly powerful, but they were designed to hit targets moving in predictable patterns. Half their shots missed completely as human ships jinked and rolled in ways that made no tactical sense. Captain Greg Wilson commanded the cargo ship Lucky Strike. His vessel was old, slow, and armed with nothing but mining lasers. But Greg had spent 20 years hauling ore through asteroid fields, dodging rocks that could crush his ship. Flying unpredictably was second nature to him. "They're trying to get a target lock on us," reported his gunner, Sergeant Nina Rodriguez. "Their computers can't figure out what we're going to do next." "Good," Greg said, spinning his ship in a corkscrew pattern that would have made a fighter pilot sick. "That's because we don't know what we're going to do next either." The first day of battle was a disaster for humanity. They lost 30 ships and barely scratched the alien fleet. But something strange happened. The aliens, who should have pressed their advantage, pulled back to regroup. "Why are they retreating?" asked Lieutenant Bobby Thompson from his fighter cockpit. "They were winning." "Because they don't understand us," came the voice of Colonel Ryan Stone over the radio. "They expected us to break and run after the first losses. Instead, we're still fighting. That scares them more than our weapons do." The aliens tried different tactics the next day. They used their speed advantage to pick off human ships one by one. They targeted the largest vessels first, trying to break human morale. What they didn't expect was that losing their biggest ships only made the humans more angry. Captain Tony Clark watched his sister ship explode in a ball of fire. The crew had been friends of his for 10 years. "All right, you alien bastards," he muttered. "You want to play rough? Let's play rough." Tony's ship was a converted asteroid miner called the Stubborn Mule. It was tough, ugly, and now it was carrying a nuclear warhead meant for clearing large asteroids. Tony aimed his ship at the nearest alien vessel and pushed the engines to maximum. "Sir, that's a suicide run," said his co-pilot, Engineer Kate Adams. "No," Tony replied. "That's a delivery run. We're delivering a message." The Stubborn Mule smashed into the alien ship's shield at full speed. The nuclear warhead detonated, and for a few seconds, a new star blazed in Earth's sky. When the light faded, both ships were gone. It was the first Zephyrian ship destroyed in the war. High Commander Vex Kalla stared at the empty space where his ship had been. They destroyed themselves to kill one of us?" "Yes, Commander," Zixtar replied, his voice shaking. "The humans seem willing to trade their lives for ours at a 1-to-1 ratio. That's impossible. No species does that. It's not logical. But the humans kept doing it. When their big ships were destroyed, they used smaller ones. When those were gone, they used fighters. When the fighters were shot down, they used cargo pods with bombs attached. Each human pilot seemed willing to die if it meant taking an alien with them. The war lasted 6 months. The Zephyrians won most of the battles, but each victory cost them more than they expected. Worse, the humans learned from every defeat. Their tactics improved, their weapons got better, and their willingness to fight never wavered. On the final day, Admiral Ben Parker led the last dozen human ships in one final attack. His fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, and running on fumes. But they had learned something the aliens never expected them to figure out. "Their shield generators are in the rear of each ship," Ben announced over the radio. "If we can get behind them, we can punch through." "How do we get behind them, sir?" asked Captain Jake Morrison, still alive and still fighting after 6 months of hell. "We go through them," Ben replied. The last human ships charged straight at the alien formation. Instead of trying to fight their way around the aliens, they flew directly into the enemy fleet. Ships collided, shields sparked, and chaos erupted across the battlefield. In the confusion, 3 human ships made it through to the alien rear guard. Their desperate attack damaged 2 Zephyrian vessels and forced the entire fleet to retreat. High Commander Vex Kalla looked at his tactical display. His empire had won the war, but at what cost? He had lost 15 ships and thousands of crew members. The humans had maybe 100 ships left in their entire fleet. But those humans were still fighting. "Sir," Zixtar said quietly, "the humans are sending another message." "What does it say?" "Round 2 starts tomorrow." For the first time in his long military career, High Commander Vex Kalla felt genuine fear. The humans had lost the war, but they were already planning the next one. They learned from defeat in ways his species never could. They treated impossible odds as just another challenge to overcome. "Order the fleet to withdraw," he commanded. "Sir, we've won. Earth is defenseless." "No," Vex Kalla replied, still staring at the tactical display. "Earth is not defenseless. It's protected by something we've never encountered before. It's protected by humans who refuse to stay defeated." The Zephyrian fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving Earth's solar system behind. They had won their first battle against humanity. It would also be their last. 5 years had passed since the Zephyrian Empire retreated from Earth. The galaxy was full of whispers about the strange species from the third spiral arm. Nobody knew exactly what had happened during the battle for Earth, but everyone knew the Zephyrians had left without finishing their conquest. On Mars, Colonel Ryan Stone walked through the halls of the new human military academy. The red planet had been transformed into humanity's war college, where officers from across the solar system came to learn the lessons of the first alien war. The key to understanding our enemy, Ryan told his class of young officers, is to understand how they think. Every galactic species fights the same way. They use superior technology, overwhelming numbers, or perfect tactics. They follow rules that make sense to them. Lieutenant Amy Johnson, now promoted after her service on the horizon, raised her hand. "What makes us different, sir?" Ryan smiled. "We don't follow their rules. We make up our own as we go along." The academy had become the birthplace of something new in galactic warfare. The instructors called it the human doctrine, but it was really just organized chaos. Human commanders learned to think like their enemies, then do the exact opposite of what made sense. Meanwhile, in the Caltharan Federation, Ambassador Helen Brooks was having a secret meeting with Federation leaders. The Caltharans were ancient, enemies of the Zephyrians, and they had heard the rumors about human fighting methods. "We want to offer your species an alliance," said Supreme Chancellor Krixova, a tall being with blue skin and silver eyes. "Our intelligence suggests that humans have developed unique tactical approaches." Helen nodded carefully. "We're always interested in making friends, but what exactly are you asking for?" "Military cooperation, joint training exercises. We want to learn from your unusual methods." What the Caltharans didn't know was that humans had been studying them for months. Every transmission, every diplomatic contact, every piece of information about Caltharan military doctrine had been analyzed by human intelligence officers. Major Chris Taylor led the first human military mission outside the solar system. His orders were simple: observe, learn, and prepare. The galaxy thought humans were primitive, and that was exactly what humanity wanted them to think. "Remember," Chris told his team as their ship approached Caltharan space, "we're not just soldiers. We're scouts. Everything you see, everything you learn, could save human lives someday." The joint training exercises began on the Caltharan world of Nexus Prime. The Caltharans were proud of their military traditions. They had been fighting wars for over 2,000 years, and their tactics were refined to mathematical perfection. Captain Mike Bennett watched the Caltharan demonstration with interest. Their soldiers moved in perfect formation, their weapons fired in coordinated volleys, and their communications were flawless. It was beautiful, disciplined, and completely predictable. "Your turn," said General Korvac, the Caltharan military commander. "Show us these human tactics we've heard about." Mike nodded to his squad. "Okay, people, show them what we learned from the Zephyrians." The human soldiers scattered in all directions. They had no formation, no coordinated plan, and no apparent strategy. Half of them ran toward the enemy position, while the others seemed to be running away. Two soldiers started fighting each other over who would carry the heavy weapon. The Caltharans watched in confusion as the human attack dissolved into chaos. Then suddenly, 3 human soldiers appeared behind their defensive line. Nobody had seen them coming. While the Caltharans were watching the obvious attack, a small team had circled around and infiltrated their position. How did they get past? "Our sensors?" General Korvac demanded. "They crawled through the drainage tunnels," Mike explained. "While you were watching the distraction, they took the real objective." The Caltharans were impressed but also disturbed. The human tactics worked, but they made no sense. How could you plan for an enemy that had no plan? Sergeant Nina Rodriguez was working on something even more disturbing. She had been studying galactic military history, looking for patterns in how different species fought. What she found changed everything. "Colonel Stone," she reported over secure communication, "I found something important. Every galactic species fights the same way. They try to win with the fewest possible losses." "That makes sense," Ryan replied. "Nobody wants to lose soldiers. But sir, that's their weakness. They won't take risks that might cost them casualties. They won't sacrifice some troops to save others. They won't do anything that might hurt their own forces." Ryan was quiet for a moment. "And we will." "Yes, sir. We've been doing it wrong." We've been trying to fight like them, just with different tactics, but we should be fighting like us. The breakthrough came during a Caltheran war game. The scenario was simple. A small force had to capture a heavily defended position. The Caltherans approached the problem like a chess match, calculating the minimum force needed to achieve victory with acceptable losses. Commander Kate Adams looked at the same problem and saw something different. "We don't need to capture the position," she told her team. "We need to make holding it too expensive for the enemy." Her solution was radical. Instead of attacking the defensive position directly, her team targeted everything that supported it. They cut power lines, destroyed supply depots, and sabotaged communication relays. When the defenders came out to stop them, Kate's soldiers didn't fight them directly. They led them on a chase through booby-trapped terrain. "This is not how military operations are conducted," protested General Korvac as he watched his simulated forces being torn apart by human guerrilla tactics. "You're right," Kate agreed. "This is how humans conduct military operations." The Caltherans won the exercise by capturing the objective, but their victory felt hollow. They had lost more troops in the simulation than they would accept in a real battle. The humans had lost even more soldiers, but they didn't seem to care. "Your casualties were unacceptable," the general told Kate after the exercise. "Our mission was accomplished," she replied. "That's what matters to us." Captain Tony Clark was developing even more extreme tactics. He had survived the war with the Zephyrians and learned something that terrified his alien allies. Humans could be taught to think like their enemies, but their enemies couldn't be taught to think like humans. "It's about commitment," he explained to a group of Caltharan officers. "You fight to preserve your forces and achieve your objectives. We fight to win no matter what it costs." To demonstrate, Tony showed them recordings from the Earth War. Human pilots ramming their ships into alien vessels, soldiers charging into hopeless battles to buy time for their comrades, entire crews sacrificing themselves to deliver a single, devastating blow to the enemy. "This is madness," whispered one of the Caltharan observers. "No," Tony corrected. "This is why we're still free and you're asking us for help." The news of human training methods spread through the galactic intelligence networks. Species that had never heard of humanity suddenly began receiving reports about their unusual military doctrine. The reports were contradictory and confusing, but they all agreed on one point. Humans fought in ways that made no sense to anyone else. High Commander Vexkala of the Zephyrian Empire read these reports with growing alarm. He had hoped that humans would settle into standard galactic military patterns after their first contact with superior technology. Instead, they seemed to be getting more unpredictable. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "the humans are training with the Caltharans. Our sources suggest they're teaching Federation forces to use human tactics." "Are the Caltharans learning from them?" "No, sir. The Caltharans are too disciplined to adopt human methods, but they're learning to fear them." That was the problem. The galaxy had seen many powerful military forces, but power could be countered with more power. The humans weren't powerful. They were something worse. They were willing to lose everything to achieve victory, and that made them unpredictable in ways that no computer model could calculate. Colonel Ryan Stone received a priority message from Earth Command while reviewing the latest training reports. The message was simple but alarming. "Multiple species are requesting information about human military capabilities. Recommend immediate security review." Ryan knew what that meant. The galaxy was starting to pay attention to humanity, and that attention would not be friendly. The Zephyrians had kept their defeat secret, but secrets didn't stay hidden forever. "Amy," he called to Lieutenant Johnson, "send a message to all human forces. Tell them to prepare for company. I think we're about to have more visitors." "Hostile visitors, sir?" "That depends on us. If we're lucky, they'll just want to study us. If we're not lucky, they'll want to eliminate us before we become a bigger problem." The human doctrine was no longer a secret experiment on Mars. It was becoming humanity's survival strategy in a galaxy full of species who were starting to realize that the newcomers from Earth didn't fight like anyone else, and that scared them more than any weapon humanity could build. In the deep reaches of space, reconnaissance ships from a dozen different species were already heading toward the solar system. The galaxy wanted to know more about these humans and their strange way of war. They were about to get their answer whether they wanted it or not. The hegemony wars began on a Tuesday. The Draxian hegemony had been planning their invasion of Caltharan space for 3 years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They had superior numbers, better weapons, and centuries of military experience. What they didn't plan for was the humans. General Sam Martinez received the emergency call while eating breakfast on Mars. The Caltharans were requesting immediate military assistance under their alliance treaty with humanity. The Draxian fleet was already moving, and they had less than a week to respond. "How many ships can we deploy?" Sam asked his staff officer, Major Ellen Carter. "The 7th Human Expeditionary Corps is ready for deployment. 2,000 soldiers, 50 ships, and enough supplies for a 6-month campaign. How many Draxians are we facing?" "Intelligence estimates 20,000 ground troops and over 200 warships." Sam was quiet for a moment. 10-to-1 odds were bad even by human standards. "Send the Corps. And Ellen? Tell them to pack extra ammunition. This is going to be a long fight." The Draxians were reptilian creatures, bigger and stronger than humans. They had conquered 12 star systems over the past century, and their military machine was considered one of the most efficient in the galaxy. They followed ancient warrior traditions that emphasized honor, strength, and overwhelming force. Colonel Angela Foster commanded the human ground forces that landed on Kepler 442b, a mining world that controlled the main supply route between Caltharan and Draxian space. The planet was strategically vital, which meant the Draxians would throw everything they had at it. "The good news," Angela told her officers as they studied the terrain maps, "is that this mining complex is built like a fortress. Thick walls, underground tunnels, and plenty of defensive positions." "What's the bad news?" asked Captain Bobby Thompson. "We have to hold it against an army that outnumbers us 10-to-1. The first Draxian assault came at dawn on the 3rd day. 2,000 human soldiers watched as 20,000 Draxian warriors marched across the open ground toward their position. The aliens moved in perfect formation, their battle flags flying and their war chants echoing across the battlefield. "They're beautiful," observed Lieutenant Steve Roberts from his position on the wall. "Like watching a parade." "A parade that wants to kill us," Angela replied. "Open fire when they reach the red markers." The battle for Kepler 442b lasted 3 weeks. The Draxians attacked in waves, following their traditional tactics of overwhelming assault followed by strategic withdrawal. They expected the humans to break after the first few days of intense fighting. Instead, something else happened. The humans got angrier. When the Draxians used chemical weapons on the 2nd week, Captain Tony Clark didn't file a protest with the Galactic War Crimes Tribunal. He sent a team of human specialists to the Draxian rear areas with biological weapons that targeted reptilian nervous systems. "Sir, using biological warfare might violate several treaties," his aide warned him. "So did using chemical weapons," Tony replied. "The difference is, we're better at this than they are." The Draxian commanders were horrified when their supply bases began reporting mysterious illnesses. Entire regiments were falling sick with a disease that seemed specifically designed to attack their species. When they demanded an explanation, the human response was simple. "You started this escalation. We're just better at it." Major Chris Taylor pioneered a new form of psychological warfare during the siege. Instead of just defending the mining complex, his teams began hunting Draxian officers in their own camps. Using human stealth technology and guerrilla tactics, they infiltrated enemy positions and eliminated high-value targets. "How are they getting past our security?" demanded General Thrackmore, the Draxian field commander, after his 3rd communications officer was found dead in his own tent. "Unknown, sir," replied his aide, a young warrior named Vixtal. "Our sensors detect nothing. Our guards see nothing. But every morning we find more bodies." The humans had learned something from their study of galactic warfare. Most species fought according to rules, even when they were trying to be ruthless. They targeted military objectives, respected certain boundaries, and tried to minimize unnecessary casualties. Humans did none of these things when they were losing. Captain Mike Bennett led a team that spent 2 months learning Draxian language, customs, and military protocols. When they finally struck, they didn't just kill their target. They made it look like he had been assassinated by his own second-in-command, causing a breakdown in the Draxian command structure. "They're not just fighting us," General Thrackmore reported to his superiors. "They're studying us, learning our weaknesses, and using our own culture against us. Impossible. Humans are primitive. They've only been in space for a few years. Primitive species don't do what these humans are doing. They're fighting a completely different kind of war." The siege reached its climax when the Draxians decided to end the stalemate with orbital bombardment. If they couldn't take the mining complex, they would destroy it from space. The humans had no way to stop the bombardment, and everyone knew it. Major Steve Roberts made a decision that would become legendary in human military history. If the Draxians wanted to destroy the mining complex, he would make sure there was nothing left worth destroying. "Sir, you're talking about the Scorched Earth Protocol," his engineering officer warned him. "If we activate the mining charges, we'll destroy everything, including ourselves." "The Draxians want this planet for its mineral resources," Steve replied. "If there are no resources, there's no point in taking the planet. But sir, we'll all die." "Maybe. But the Draxians will get nothing for their victory except radioactive wasteland. The humans spent their last night rigging the entire mining complex with explosives. Not just the buildings, but the mines themselves. Every tunnel, every ore deposit, every piece of valuable infrastructure was wired to blow. When the Draxian orbital bombardment began, Steve Roberts sent one final message to the enemy fleet: "You can have our planet. Enjoy the cleanup." The mining complex exploded in a chain reaction that could be seen from orbit. The humans died, but they took with them everything the Draxians had come to capture. The planet was worthless, the resources were gone, and 20,000 Draxian warriors had died for nothing. The news of Kepler 442b spread through both fleets like wildfire. The humans had lost the battle, but they had made victory meaningless for their enemies. It was a level of spite that no galactic species had ever encountered. Admiral Karen Phillips commanded the human fleet during the final battle of the war. Her ships were outnumbered 4-1, her crews were exhausted, and her ammunition was running low. But she had learned something from the ground war that the Draxians never expected. "They fight to win territory and resources," she told her captains during their final briefing. "We fight to make sure they regret fighting us at all." The Battle of Titan's Eye lasted 6 hours. The humans lost half their fleet, but they used tactics so vicious and unpredictable that the Draxian admiral finally called for a ceasefire. Captain Nathan Wells was piloting a damaged fighter when he received the withdrawal order. His ship was leaking air, his weapons were empty, and his engines were failing. The logical thing to do was surrender or retreat. Instead, he aimed his fighter at the Draxian flagship and pushed his engines to overload. "Control, this is Nathan Wells. Tell my family I love them. And tell the Draxians that this is what happens when you threaten humanity." Nathan's fighter hit the Draxian command ship at full speed. The explosion damaged their main bridge and killed their fleet admiral. The Draxian fleet, suddenly leaderless and facing an enemy that treated death as a weapon, decided that victory wasn't worth the cost. The Hegemony Wars ended not with humanity's victory, but with the Draxians' decision to stop fighting. They had won most of the battles, captured most of the territory, and inflicted far more casualties than they had suffered. But they had also learned that fighting humans was like fighting a virus. Even when you won, the cure was often worse than the disease. 3 months after the ceasefire was signed, General Thrackmore met with Colonel Angela Foster to discuss prisoner exchanges. Angela had survived the siege of Kepler 442b by pure luck, having been evacuated for medical treatment the day before the final explosion. "Your species fights without honor," the Draxian general told her. "We fight to win," Angela replied. "Honor is something you can afford when you're not facing extinction. Do you feel no shame for what you did on Kepler 442b? 20,000 of my warriors died for nothing." Angela was quiet for a moment. "General, You came to our space, threatened our allies, and tried to conquer territory that didn't belong to you. We didn't start this war, but we sure as hell finished it. The general left the meeting with a report that would terrify the Draxian High Command. The humans weren't just willing to die for victory. They were willing to make victory so expensive that their enemies would choose defeat instead. Within a year, 3 more galactic powers had learned the same lesson. The Nexus Syndicate tried to blockade human trade routes and found their merchant fleets under constant attack by human pirates, who seemed to know exactly where to strike. The Great Assembly Hall on Centauri Prime had never held a meeting like this one. Representatives from 43 different species sat in the massive chamber, all of them there to discuss the same problem: what to do about the humans. Ambassador Julie Sanders walked into the hall flanked by General Paul Martinez and Admiral Karen Phillips. Every eye in the chamber followed them as they took their seats at the center of the room. The humans had been invited to defend themselves against charges of conducting warfare in ways that violated galactic law. Supreme Arbiter Kelrath, an ancient being whose species had been mediating galactic disputes for over 5,000 years, called the assembly to order. His voice echoed through the chamber as he spoke. We are here to address the conduct of the human species in recent military conflicts. Multiple civilizations have filed complaints about human warfare methods that they claim violate established galactic conventions. Representative Thixvar of the Draxian hegemony stood first. His reptilian features were scarred from the recent war, and his voice carried barely controlled anger. The humans do not fight with honor. They use biological weapons, conduct assassinations of military leaders, and destroy resources rather than allow honorable conquest. They treat death as a tool of war instead of something to be avoided. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Similar complaints came from other species. The Nexus Syndicate spoke of human pirates who attacked merchant vessels with suicidal determination. The Vorton Collective described human infiltrators who seemed willing to die just to gather intelligence. The Ethereal Commonwealth representative, a being of pure energy contained in a crystal shell, spoke last. The humans have introduced a new concept to galactic warfare. They do not fight to preserve their forces or achieve limited objectives. They fight to ensure their enemies suffer more than they do. This is unprecedented and dangerous. Supreme Arbiter Kelrath turned to the human delegation. Ambassador Sanders, how do you respond to these accusations? Julie stood slowly, looking around the chamber at the dozens of species that had come to judge humanity. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, knowing that her words could determine whether the galaxy would accept humans as equals or mark them for destruction. Honored representatives, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. My species stands accused of fighting differently than you do. This accusation is completely true. The chamber erupted in surprised whispers. Most species would have denied the charges or tried to explain them away. The humans had just admitted to everything. We fight differently because we are different, Julie continued. Every species in this chamber became part of galactic civilization because you were conquered, absorbed, or chose to join when you realized you couldn't win. Humans are here because we refused to be conquered. General Paul Martinez stood and activated a holographic display. Let me show you the difference between human warfare and galactic warfare. The display showed tactical analysis from dozens of conflicts across galactic history. In every case, the pattern was the same. Species fought to achieve objectives with minimal losses. When losses became too high, they surrendered or negotiated. You fight to win, Paul said. We fight to make sure our enemies lose. There's a difference. The display changed to show human conflicts. The desperate defense of Earth against impossible odds. The siege of Kepler 442b, where humans chose mutual destruction over defeat. The Battle of Titan's Eye, where a single human pilot changed the course of a war by sacrificing his life. When the Zephyrians came to our world, Paul continued, they expected us to surrender like the 47 other species they had conquered. Instead, we made them pay for every mile of space, every hour of battle, every small victory they achieved. In the end, they won every engagement but lost the war because the cost became too high. Representative Vixtal of the Zephyrian Empire stood reluctantly. As one of the few survivors of the Earth campaign, his testimony carried special weight. "The humans tell the truth," he said quietly. "We defeated them in every battle, but they made victory meaningless. They learned from every defeat and became more dangerous with each loss. When we finally withdrew, it was not because we were beaten. It was because we realized that completely conquering them would require the destruction of our entire fleet." Admiral Karen Phillips took over the presentation. "The galaxy fears us because we approach warfare from a completely different philosophy. You fight wars to gain something: territory, resources, strategic advantage. We fight wars to protect what we already have, and there is no price too high to pay for that protection." The display showed recordings from human military academies, young officers learning tactics that would horrify most galactic species: suicide attacks, scorched earth protocols, psychological warfare designed to break enemy morale completely. "You see madness," Karen said. "We see necessity. When your survival is at stake, everything else becomes secondary." The chamber was silent as the implications sank in. The humans weren't just different warriors. They represented a completely different approach to conflict that the galaxy had never encountered. Supreme Arbiter Kelarath spoke carefully. "What you describe sounds like a species that cannot be reasoned with or deterred. How can the galaxy coexist with beings who treat warfare as total commitment?" Ambassador Julie smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You can coexist with us the same way you coexist with any dangerous force of nature. You respect it, you don't provoke it, and you remember that some things are too costly to fight." She activated her own display, showing human colonization efforts, trade agreements, and peaceful diplomatic contacts. "We don't want to be your enemies," she said. "We'd prefer to be your friends, your trading partners, your allies. But if you force us to be your enemies, we will be the most dedicated enemies you have ever faced." The display changed to show something that made several representatives gasp in horror. It was a detailed plan called the Final Protocol. If any species ever attempted to completely destroy humanity, humans had prepared something that would make their extinction meaningless. Every human ship, every human colony, every human military base has received the same orders, Julie explained. "If our species faces extinction, we will not go quietly. We will hunt our enemies across the galaxy. We will learn everything about them, infiltrate their societies, and find ways to destroy them that their greatest minds never imagined. We will make sure that the species responsible for ending humanity will not long survive their victory. Our extinction will be paid for with the extinction of our killers. This is not a threat. This is a promise." The chamber was dead silent. 43 different species, some of them among the most powerful in the galaxy, stared at the three humans, who had just calmly described a plan for mutual annihilation. High Commander Vexkala of the Zephyrian Empire stood slowly. His forearms trembled slightly as he spoke. "The Zephyrian Empire withdraws all territorial claims in human space. We recognize humanity as a sovereign power and request a formal non-aggression pact." One by one, other representatives stood and made similar announcements. The Draxian hegemony, despite their recent war, offered to negotiate a peace treaty. The Nexus Syndicate proposed trade agreements. The Vorthan Collective suggested cultural exchanges. None of them mentioned the complaints that had brought them to this assembly. Captain Nathan Wells, who had somehow survived his seemingly suicidal attack during the war, watched the proceedings from the human ship in orbit. He had been promoted to command the UES Defiance, one of humanity's newest warships. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving diplomatic messages from 12 different species. They all want to establish formal relations with humanity." Nathan smiled grimly. "Fear is a wonderful diplomat, isn't it?" "Sir, do you think the peace will last?" Nathan looked out at the stars through his viewport. Somewhere out there were species that controlled technology beyond human understanding, commanded fleets that could destroy solar systems, and possessed weapons that could remake reality itself. But none of them wanted to fight humanity. "As long as they remember what we're capable of," he said, "peace will last just fine." The galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through history. Strength could be matched with greater strength. Intelligence could be countered with superior technology. Overwhelming numbers could be defeated by better tactics. But a species that approached warfare with the simple philosophy that losing was worse than dying could not be safely fought at all. 50 years later, when the Taldari and Zephyrians faced a border dispute that threatened to ignite galactic war, both sides requested human mediation. Captain Amanda Foster arrived with a single ship and a simple message: fight each other if you must, but remember that humans will be watching, and we have very long memories. The dispute was resolved within a week. The galaxy had many powerful species, ancient civilizations, and advanced technologies. But it had only one species that could end conflicts just by reminding everyone what warfare really cost. And that was why the galaxy feared human warriors above all others. Not because humans were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because they were the only species that had turned their willingness to die into their greatest weapon.